It's funny, the transformation for the character, it's a track completely invented by the director Frank Galati. There's always a cafe owner, but it's not usually played by a man. But it's absurdist comedy, it's absurdist theater, so it kind of makes sense in a strange way. Getting ready, I try to do as good a face as I can for the top of the show. So usually I get in probably 2 hours before the show actually starts, and the reason for that is getting the makeup on, sure, but also there are hip pads, there are top padding, there is a number of pairs of tights that I put on. So there's a lot that goes into it, so it takes all of that time. Once the show starts, this is probably the shortest show in the rep season. So I only have 11 minutes to change from the cafe owner into Mr. Papillon, and sadly, after putting on all of this makeup, I simply take 5 minutes to wipe it all off with a I don't know if we can do product placements, but Clean and Clear makeup dissolving wipes. Maybe they'll give me a sponsorship, but it just pulls the makeup right off. And also what helps with that is the using the primer, which is a lotion that I use that kind of it creates a barrier between the makeup and my skin, so I can easily get it off. When it becomes really nuts is when, after I play Mr. Papillon, it's intermission, and then I have 15 minutes to get back into the cafe owner after taking 2 hours to get into her at the beginning of the show, which is crazy. And I do what I call a 15-minute face. I take all of intermission. Thanks to the wonderful stage manager here, Kelly Borgia, she gives me calls to kind of keep me aware of what's happening. If anybody loves this is a kabuki brush. It makes me laugh every time just because it looks like I'm swathing on a lot of kabuki makeup. But she comes and tells me it's, 15 minutes, 10, 5, she gives me the running countdown. I literally am getting my eyelashes and my wig on and the boa wrapped around myself for the top of Act 2. Right as we're about to start. It takes the entire intermission. You want to hear the saddest thing? Sometimes the 15-minute face is better than the one I take 2 hours to work on. Because I think I'm a little more focused, and so I spend a little less time, worrying about things and futzing about things. I just basically do all the basics. The first act of Rhinoceros is a lot brighter in terms of the lighting. You can see things more, and I'm on for a longer time as the cafe owner at the top of Act 1. So we made the makeup is a bit better. The 15-minute works for Act 2 because it suddenly becomes a lot darker. And then I pull a wig off, it becomes even more of a gag. I would say if you looked really closely at the top of Act 2, you'd be like, woof. But no one has the ability to do that because it's so dark. So I tried at the top of the show to establish the look, and hopefully that's what they remember, is that first really well put on face. That's what I hope. Well, I've sent the tape in for RuPaul a couple times for RuPaul's Drag Race. I would think that my style of drag is a little bit more, I wouldn't say old-fashioned because I don't want to say that, but I think it's a little more classic and a little more campy. And of course, I love to see the kind of things that they can do with makeup. But a lot of times for me as a drag performer, if I put on so much makeup that it takes away from my expressions, then it's not done really it's done me a sort of a disservice, because sometimes you can paint on all those lines and all those highlights and shadows and everything, and suddenly you look like that face, and it's kind of like a mask. And I want people to be able to see my facial expressions. If you've been watching Drag Race, that Binta LaCreme is one of my favorites, and I think she's one of the great entertainers. Her makeup's pretty simple for what she does, and it's because she really wants you to see her face when she performs those characters. So for me, I guess if you had to label me, they would call me a theater queen, and that's a great thing. Like Varla Jean Merman and some of the others, Coco Peru, and some of the others who've been around forever, Peaches Christ, and others who have they do the same face all the time. It isn't super outlandish. It's just changing sort of the shapes of their face to seem a little bit more feminine. But I still kind of want people to know it's me. You know, I never intended to do drag. I grew up in the South. My mom says that I did dress up every now and then. There is a very funny framed photo of me in a rose kimono. That I think was like my grandmother's robe. But I didn't do it frequently growing up. I lived in a small southern town, and it just wasn't something that piqued my interest. You know, I don't dress in drag because I feel the need or I want to be a woman. You know, I think now these days the lines get a little blurred. You know, especially with the more visibility for individuals who are transgender, and that's not me, of course. I guess I'm labeled a cisgendered male who dresses in drag. Maybe a cross-dresser, you know, maybe that'll work, but mostly I don't do it for any reason that is related to sexuality or identity. I do it for entertainment purposes. I realized early on that drag, when I did drag, it made people laugh and they enjoyed it, and I began to get more opportunities in performance, entertainment, and show business, I guess, that it was something I began to embrace because it helped to pay bills and it helped to keep me busy as a performer. So it was something that I sort of begrudgingly latched onto because I find the whole process a little exhausting. There have been times I've gotten ready for drag shows, and by the time I've got on all the pads and the tights, and, well, you know, Jay, when I did MAME at Freefall, by the time I was fully transformed to play the role, I still had 2 hours and 30 minutes of show to do, and I was exhausted, from getting into it all. So, it can be tough, and the older I get, it gets harder and harder, except for the fact that I live in Florida, and I can go to thrift stores and get all the most beautiful caftans and jewelry you've ever seen because, that's sort of my look. I always say my look is sort of bar mitzvah mother, you know what I mean? Granny, bubby, and that's kind of the look I'm shooting for, and I've always had a really nice time and been really friendly with other queens because I never really went for the beauty aspect of it. I went for the camp and the kitsch and the humor, the humorous aspect. Because honestly, it is such a gift to be able to entertain people and make people forget their troubles. I do not take it lightly. I'm always humbled by the opportunities that I have, and especially when it comes to making people forget their troubles or laugh at certain things or themselves, or even laugh at gender sometimes, because a lot of it is so silly. But yeah, the first time I did drag was in college. There was a dance concert happening, and it was all about Hollywood. It was like Hooray for Hollywood, or Hello Hollywood, Hello, or some funny title like that. And they did numbers from movies and stuff, and there was a Carmen Miranda number. And none of the female dancers really were aware of Carmen Miranda or really knew anything about it. And somebody asked me about Carmen Miranda. I was like, you don't know Carmen Miranda, growing up like I did, loving those movies, watching those movies. Dance instructor said that is hilarious. I was going to school in like South Georgia, at Valdosta State University, which actually has a really great theater program. But imagine in that area, one of your big features was a man in drag playing Carmen Miranda. It's kind of a crazy situation. So, and what happened was it became really, really popular and beloved, and people really enjoyed it and laughed a lot, even in that area. And I found that in drag, I could perform in a way that I couldn't always as a male actor, I guess. I sometimes call myself a male actress in certain roles. But as a male actor, there's a lot of confines, and I was once told by a professor that if I didn't butch it up, or if I didn't, try to go the way of an ingenue or something, which was never in the cards for me, that I would never work. And so I sort of laugh about that. And I always make sure that they follow me on Facebook and Instagram. So I make sure to keep up my posts so they can see how busy I am. Am I bitter? Absolutely. No, but it was an important thing for me to kind of prove, that I could do this. So again, back to what we were talking about with gender and everything, I always try to reiterate to people, I do not get dressed in drag for identity reasons or sexuality reasons. It really is to entertain people. I often laugh that I am kind of, I always say that I'm like the Suncoast's favorite clown in a gown, or, you know, or man in a dress, because for me, I don't really spend a lot of time worried about the fact if you can clock it or not. But strangely enough, people have come to see this show and had not known that I was a man, which is outrageous. But I think there's a bit of confusion there with the look and the lighting and the dress and just the voice, because I do prefer to sing live in drag and not lip sync. I have lip synced because it's kind of something that's just done in Florida for drag, but I don't really like to do that. I much prefer playing roles or singing live in cabarets and that sort of thing. And if you've seen the show or anything, my makeup for this show is a little less than what I normally do for a drag performance, but not much. And I'll tell you why. If I didn't do all these highlights and shadows and things, which I ultimately blend out so it doesn't look too jarring, I would look really like a man wearing makeup. You know what I mean? It would be really flat, and it would lose some of the part of just what the illusion is. Like, I think you got to wear some of this makeup to cover up your beard. You got to wear some of this makeup to change the shape of your face. I try to change. If you look really closely, I sometimes line the bottom of my chin because I want to make my face seem smaller and less masculine. Even though I think as a drag performer, if you have a round, sort of fleshy face, I have a round, fleshy Irish face, it does help. It actually does help a lot for what you're doing, because you can create a real look. I'd love to do more impersonations of celebrities, but it's hard for me with my frame to do a lot of the ones that I pull off really well. And this will make you laugh, are like B. Arthur, Angela Lansbury. I don't want to say handsome women because I love those ladies, but Elaine Stritch and stuff like that. And I just started doing Joan Rivers because I've always been able to do her voice. You know, I could do her voice, and I can do a lot of different voices, like Liza Minnelli and all that shit. But the problem is I don't always look exactly like them because they're smaller. So I can do a lot of voices, but for me, impersonating certain characters, they have to be a certain type of handsome woman, you know. And Joan really worked out because a friend of mine built a beautiful jacket, and they wanted to do a fashion police type of thing, and I thought it was fun, and we had a blast doing that, and I was happy to be asked to do it. And I kind of got that through here and through Mr. Joey Panic, who's always been, I mean, I've been on the Suncoast View hosting in drag and not in drag, and he's been a good friend to me and a good supporter, and kind of pushed me out there in many ways. Even here, because Michael Edwards and Peter Amster saw me in Gutenberg, the musical, at American Stage, and wanted to use me for Living on Love. So, you know, there you have it. I always knew that I would probably start being more busy as I get into my 40s. I was always sort of a character guy, you know, and then when I lost my hair, you know, it made it more obvious. I mean, I hate to say that, but I mean, I think there's plenty of really good-looking, you know, bald leading men. I'm all for bald people. I love bald people. Unite, bald people. But I knew I would do more character work, and that has happened. And so that's been great. It can be equal, and then sometimes it just depends. Sometimes for me, sometimes drag is the kiss of death. Sometimes when you do theater, sometimes it's used and it's like a really great thing, right? Like sometimes they're like, oh my God, I have this great option. But then once you do it, audiences really like it, and then they kind of only see you in that way. But I mean, I always hope that that's not the case, but sometimes that's just sort of naturally what happens. And so they only see you in a dress, and then that can be kind of limiting, because I started out wanting to be, you know, just an actor, you know, just a character man, musicals, plays, you know, stuff like that. This could be fun. I'll lean in a little, and like this. You might want to do some retouching, just a little, hon, just a little. Oh, no,
McGee.